All right, let me see if I can set this up here. Hopefully, I think my phone might fall a few times during the stream. Hopefully, you guys can hear me too through these earbuds. Did you guys hear that? Hold on, I'm getting like feedback here. What is going on? Guys, I'm a boomer. I don't know why I'm getting feedback. All right, well, so the topic of today's live stream is going to be along the lines of discernment, just being able to connect the dots and understand really what you're dealing with when you're talking about when you're reading about information, because there's a lot of information out there. There's I mean, back in the day it was like personal blogs. Before that it was just like network TV and what your professor wanted to tell you. But now there's just so many different streams of information. So part of the edited videos that I do are kind of just taking what's out there and kind of sussing it out. But some comments that I get, people engage me that like I'm a proponent of whatever is being printed in, say, like New Scientist or Nature or whatever, right? Which, by the way, Nature is a peer-reviewed uh, publication, right? It's a scientific publication, but that's part of what this stream is about: is what holds its weight and what doesn't. And the answer to that is it depends on the observer, because you can take someone who just reads one magazine and all the information, like let's say New Scientist, right? And just take that as gospel, as the truth. When really, and this is the challenge, is either discerning what you believe is closest to the truth, which requires, a period of time of just gathering all and taking in all kinds of info, versus just trying to pick and choose and going from there and following only that. And I guess being able to connect the dots and find relevant information is largely trial and error and introspection and experience. And in this day and age, that's a kind of a tough sell, especially to a working person or somebody going to school, like taking school seriously. Um, it's got to be a special type of individual who, does has like they fit different types of criteria. So someone who reads a lot, someone who is, like I said earlier, introspective, or someone who's like a truth seeker, someone who just wants to get to the bottom of things. And it's that's really difficult to uh, to really be sure one way or another what you're reading is BS or not. And along the way, there's going to be all kinds of different information coming at you, like narratives, for example. A narrative, simply put, is a story that unfortunately gets pushed into different streams of media, right? So, like, the classic one would be like the talking heads on network TV. And then they'll have this carefully crafted narrative with an ultimate message and an ultimate bottom line, that is intended to be consistent to suit whatever agenda, right? And believe it or not, that those types of agendas aren't just limited to like geopolitics and other subject matter, but it's alive and well in archaeology and all kinds of biological, physical, or geographical even science. Um, so I think a lot of what I noticed in not only the comment section but conversations between people and other people like Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, other journalists, they're not spinning a narrative, but some people think they are, you know, because the mainstream is just one narrative, and a lot of people still believe, like, because of the power of a narrative like that, there are untruths that still exist in human consciousness, right? So, for example, the peopling of the North Americas, 13,000 years ago across the Bering Strait, that has, even right now, even though it's been debunked, people still believe that, and that's because there's a lot of reasons, but ultimately there are people who still push the narrative because they either profit from it or they benefit in some way, right? Whether it's they get to keep the job and teach the false paradigm, and they're just entrenched. That's probably 90-95%. And then others are just either sheer ignorance or quote trollish behavior, or just going against the grain, like contrarian types that care about the argument and not the actual truth. And being able to discern between people like that is it's it takes practice. It's a skill. So anyway, discernment, right? So for example, let's talk about like a concrete example. So let's Mesa Verde, for example, right? Mesa Verde uh, has thrown a monkey wrench for probably the better part of 15 years now, 2003. So almost 20 years. Um, they had already disproven the into America theory, the Bering Strait, the Clovis First theory. That's already been debunked, but the narrative is still there, you know. And this goes, you're seeing it now with Guatemala, the advent of lidar, and how just the giant like cities that are just been hidden underneath the canopy of South America and the Amazon basin, just giant cities there that were host to millions and millions of people living in a civilization, a successful one, you know. And that is not even being taken seriously. I mean, it's being noted, it's being reported, but academics aren't really adjusting their curriculum to fit that. So in a way, they're not on the cutting edge. They're kind of just holding people back from the truth. So being able to read between the lines, where are you getting information from? Whoever the author is, you maybe start there. Look at where they're coming from. Where were they educated? Who have they worked for before? And the people they're working for, who bankrolls them. Just, and eventually that'll lead you down, for the most part, to the right place to give you more information. Now, like, let's say that who bankrolls new scientists, for example. Let's just keep using them. Um, then I think that'll go a long way toward discernment. You can take their opinion with a grain of salt. Now, all this stuff they've taught in high school. Like, do you guys remember DBQs, document-based questions? You have to be able to detect bias, right? So, like, a common one would be like the Civil War, for example, right? They'll show different types of propaganda, and you'd have to identify the bias and why certain things about that are skewed or wrong. It's just like that, but in real time. And people have trouble discerning and connecting the dots in real time because, and not to blame them or anything, not stupid or anything like that. They just don't know better. They don't know that they're being lied to. or they don't understand. Like they just take people's word at they don't think twice about it, especially if they come from a position of authority, right? Zahi Hawass is another guy. Oh, I think I just got a message here. Um, sorry, I just missed your message. I think it said something about pre-dynastic Egypt. What do I think about pre-dynastic Egypt? Well, they those I know that those people didn't consider themselves the tip of the spear of their civilization. They talked about an earlier civilization called and that they called the first time Zep-Tepi, which some people speculate to be Atlantis, or at least Atlantean in terms of its contemporary, so pre-Ice Age. Who do I think they are? Well, it, they've got a lot of similarities, their phenotypes and stuff, to people of like the Canary Islands, the Basque people, and even people from early Ireland and Scotland. When I'm talking about like red hair and like lighter features, and that has been associated with Atlantis. So maybe they were part of that diaspora, and they came upon Lower Egypt, and then at the time Lower Egypt was, uh, if we assume they had the information that they had, then Lower Egypt, right after the Ice Age, right after the Younger Dryas, would have been a suitable spot to start a civilization. And I'm assuming it's like these people they had cultivation tools, they had agriculture, they had the know-how. Do you believe that people of the Mercies, of the Americas, traveled to Egypt? Sorry, it disappeared. Um, the people of the Americas, did they travel to Egypt? They could have been traveling to and from via the Phoenicians, because the Phoenicians allegedly had gold mines in like modern day Detroit and like the Great Lakes area, and they could have easily been going to and from civilizations in and around Egypt. Um, I wouldn't. Let me just tell you this: I wouldn't be surprised if if that were the case. If that came out tomorrow, I definitely wouldn't be surprised. I mean, what it's I mean, because it's all but certain that the Phoenicians were mining whatever it was they're mining over there. I think it was nickel. Uh, I think nickel was one of the things. Uh, yeah. But if they were indeed doing that, then for sure they were doing other stuff. They were going to other places as well. I know there are a few people who say that they were going down along the north and South American coasts and the Caribbean, all over there, modern day Cuba. Especially this would have been like 3,000, 4,000 BC or so. But if you're asking before then, so like this, like if we're talking like Solutreans or whatever, it's possible. I think it's possible because I mean, how did the Solutreans get their tools over there? You know, how did they get their tools from modern day France and Germany? These spearheads, these Solutrean spearheads, and how are they coming up on the east coast of America pre Ice Age? It's a conundrum, right? Like they weren't throwing spears across the pond, right? They definitely were going. So I would think that if navigation, if people had navigation back then they were probably, using that, and they're probably going back and forth a lot of places because those currents, they're conveyor belts, man. And if all you need is the knowledge of, like, if you have boats, all you would need is a knowledge of the general area and where the currents take you, and you'd be fine. You just need, like, I don't know, a week of food, a month, some cases a month of food, depending on which current you're taking. Um, they called them trade winds in the west. In France, they called them alizé, which is a trade wind. And yeah, I would, if something, here's another thing that I never really got to touch upon. This is why I think people should study linguistics, is because if there's a word for something, especially many different words for that one thing, then you could bet your ass that it's a huge part of their culture, the culture that utilized that language. because it's important enough to use novel energy to create that word and put it into the vernacular. This is why people say that the capacity for the spoken word is divine. You can't teach a dog to talk, right? And humans can talk, and from there, there's a lot of things become possible through the spoken word. So, if there's a word for boat or vessel or something like that in an ancient language, then it would make sense. Hey, since they have a boat, I mean, if they probably had boats then, right? Or fire is another one. They probably, you get what I'm saying. Yeah, you guys have to excuse me. I'm all sweaty and stuff. Just taking a break from working out here. Another thing about pre-dynastic Egypt is the Amarna Kings. You guys should look that up. The Amarna Kings, Amarna. This is right before Ramses took over, and there's a lot of parallels to those kings. You know, one of them was there's Amenhotep the Fourth. Um, that name escapes me right now. I'm having a brain fart right now. But they brought monotheism to Egypt, and there's a lot of parallels between the Amarna kings and the Davidic kingdoms in the the Bible. The God of Israel's whole canon, right? So that's interesting. And I did a video on that maybe 2.5, 3 years ago now, and that video got flagged. So, and I don't think it was that controversial. I think scholars have been talking about that for a long time. And so that kind of added to my discernment, because if they're flagging that type of video, then I wouldn't be surprised to hear, those scholars in the past who brought it up. And I'm talking scholars back in like the golden age of academia, which is like the Gilded Age, pretty much like the late 1800s back then. So if they were book burning back then on that subject matter, then that is good to know, essentially. Thank you, David. Akhenaten, that's the guy. Yeah, it was Akhenaten, his son, and I think Thutmose was the last one, right? And then Amenhotep the Fourth. So yeah, like King Solomon is supposed to mirror that. So like Moses. Moses wasn't part of but I have to. I don't remember the guy's name, but I had read his book, and I did an episode on what he was talking about, and that whole from Solomon to like from David on downwards. Um, there was some sort of parallel, even right down to like the children that they had, the mistresses, and all that stuff. So, the implication, if that's true, let's say that let's just say a group of people took their religion and superimposed it into theirs. What kind of implication is that? Well, I don't know. I haven't thought enough about it, but now it's like come to my attention, which is kind of what this stream is about, right? Like you don't really you're kind of reading between the lines there. There's no document well, I mean, except for that guy's book, but like there's no document that'll state, yeah, the God of Israel. They just took the whole mythology from Egypt. Like there's no scripture or anything like that. But you can infer something like that, especially given the fact that it's been suppressed. I don't know. That's just such a red flag for me. And I'm not like a investigative journalist or anything. I'm just reading stuff. Birth of monotheism. Yeah, exactly. The birth of monotheism was around that time in recorded history. Um, the whole polytheism, monotheism thing that's definitely a rabbit hole. And if you get into Gnosticism and stuff, and other religions and where they were disseminated from, then you can kind of see like an overall pattern, and like exactly where in the physical world stuff was spreading and starting, right? So like Hinduism wasn't a thing until the Aryans rode in on horses, or whoever, the people from the steppe, whoever, whatever name you want to call, right? The people on horseback came down to India, the Indian subcontinent, and then Hinduism came from there. Um, even the Shakya in Buddhism, the Shakyamuni Buddha comes from the Sakya clan, and the Sakya clan, that's basically horseback people, or the Scythians, right? There's been links to that. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of BS out there too, guys. There's a lot of BS too. Um, Again, like it's like how can you be so sure, right? Like if I, if I was watching someone's live stream talking about this, my one of my first questions would be, how are you so sure? Like, how do you know? There's no way you've read everything. You don't have the answers. I don't. This is just from intuition and reading a lot of stuff, hearing a lot of people talk about stuff, witnessing stuff like getting banned, off limits talk, how stuff has, when something is said and then how it ages. And this is all superimposed with like, I'm glued to like academic journals, like what's being evaluated, what evidence is coming in, what's coming out, um, what's being printed, and what's just passed, what's even being read. When I did my master's in education, um, my advisor and like two other professors just read my final, and then they just let me in. They just let me graduate. Not to say like I didn't deserve it or anything like that, but it doesn't take much for stuff. I'm very aware of how easy it is to get stuff printed from like into an academic journal. But then there's different there. It depends on the subject too. So you can't use that as a blanket, and like that's the problem. Academia is definitely flawed. It's not what it was. There's a lot of BS agents. I would even venture to say that the majority of it is just not peer pressured review, right? Just to get into the, like, it's just a formality. They're just trying to graduate and get a job as a teacher or whatever, trying to get tenure, whatever it is that's driving them. It's just become a go through the motions thing. Whereas like back in the Gilded Age, it was really like, um, they wanted to get to the truth. Think of like the UFC, right? Or like mixed martial arts, right? It's young. They wanted to find out what was the best art, and they weren't like, there's no bullshitting that, right? Back in the Gilded Age, the academics wanted to get to the bottom of what the fuck was going on. There's a lot of archaeology. An interesting, rabbit hole, I guess, subject matter to explore is biblical archaeology. Back in those days, there was a lot of stuff going on, and I think it's worth reading about what the pressing conversations were at that time. And that's the great thing about newspapers and stuff. You can go to your local library and get microfilm on some period in time in history. Uh, let's say LA Times, 1961, whatever, and see what they were talking about. Read all the opinion pages. If you really cared about finding out, um, like having your finger on the pulse of whatever society you want to find out about, don't take it from God forbid, someone with an agenda on Twitter or something like that, right? A lot of people on Twitter trying to rewrite history, by the way. So be careful of that too. There are a lot of agenda driven stuff, but just go straight to the source, figure out what the source is. And that's another thing I noticed nowadays is when you're doing research papers, they, they're not as strict on like APA format, MLA format, citing your sources correctly. They're really lax on that, and I'm talking about like in high school and like grammar school. It's surprising to me. So like, what do you think happens when those kids grow up? They don't. It doesn't occur to them to look into something like that. Uh, me see. Oh, there we go. Grub O'Neill, what's up, buddy? I got tiny little pics from Egypt during World War One. Oh, wow, hold on. Got a postcard with a woman beaten up with a quote, "Oh, looks like your husband is back from the war." Yikes. Yeah, that's dark, man. Yeah, back then, World War One, so they would have even was shell shocked even a term back then? Yeah, that's nuts, dude. That way to derail the live stream, Grub. Just kidding. Yeah, definitely a different world back then, for sure. For sure. Yeah, World War One is when that that's what set us on the trajectory of where we are now. Yeah, it was called shell shock. Yep, yep. Yeah, World War One is like people ditched academia, like the focus of society changed, and we just got into this geopolitical shit show that we're in now. Oh, sorry. No, I'm just kidding, dude. Yeah, it's been a while. I recently came back like a month ago, and then I don't really have a computer. My computer took a shit on me, and it's not reliable. Let's just say that. And I'm outside most of the time, so I think uh, since I got this phone, it's been better. And live streaming's a lot more. As long as I am staying on a subject, then it's okay. Otherwise, I'll just get like my attention deficit disorder will kick in. Actually, I don't have ADD. I'm just kidding. Someone chatted something. Let me see. The brutal murder of Tsar Nicholas. Yeah, that's brutal too. Imagine that. And they don't even. I never learned that in high school. I learned that. I mean, like he was assassinated or whatever, and the power shifted. But the way that he was murdered and his whole family was murdered was brutal. It was brutal. And yeah, World War One was the tipping point, um, or the turning point rather. And a lot of stuff happened around that time. Federal Reserve gets enacted. That just it seemed like you remember Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? It's like America's Frankenstein, and we had one brain pre World War One, and then that brain comes out, and then a new brain comes in, and there's a new brain trust. All these different decisions are being made, and it seems like a blueprint is being followed. Um, yeah. Uh, if you guys live near a university, especially like an older university, uh, and if it's a state university that you're not enrolled in or anything, I think there's a way where you can still use the facilities. Maybe you might have to pay a fee, but definitely go check out. And the older the university, the better because their microfilm database probably goes way back. And definitely look at like the newspaper of like the 1890s, man. Um, there's a lot of content. Like if you're looking for context to fill in the holes of your understanding of history, that's a great way to do it. Old interviews are another one. Even old film reels with no sound of like 1904 San Francisco, like pre-earthquake San Francisco. That's a trip. Just that stuff alone um, will help a lot, man. Just to solidify your understanding of history. And the more you study, like when you talk, I'm sure most people here love history, I'm sure, and are interested in history. I'm sure you guys have friends that are interested in history. Um, I don't tell me about your experience, but my experience is most people have like a certain period of history that they're into, right? A lot of my friends are into American history. I was never into American history to begin with. Interestingly enough, studying religion and ancient history and geology and stuff like that has led me to the history of America. So I think if I had to do it again, I would start from America first and then go back. But I kind of like the way I I like my roundabout way too. I guess there's no negativity there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is American history is very important, especially to like the modern context. Really try to understand American history. There have been a few chats here. Um, Australian soldiers were the last crusaders to capture the Holy Lands. Yeah, yeah. Uh, David writing, yes. Are the monarchy and church still a serious power? I think of a lot is made about the monarchy not having power anymore. I, I mean, we're talking. Whoa, hold on a second. My phone's going. Okay. Um, I think they have more power and influence uh, than the modern researcher, let's say, would think. Because yeah, their power definitely on the surface has diminished since for what the past few centuries. But they still have networks that go back centuries. They have wealth that they have untold amounts of wealth that'll go back, and that'll stay with them, you know, unless they get Bolshevik and Tsar Nicholas, right? But even then, you know, someone's gonna have to inherit that estate. So yeah, I would still think they're relevant, definitely. Now, since Queen Elizabeth died and the new guy's in, is he gonna start making rapid changes? No, I think he's. It's just now out in the open that he's the guy, but he's probably was just as influential as before the Queen died. Let's see. I'm seeing the church and monarchy always stay quiet through all wars. Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially wars since like Napoleon. They all link up at the end. I love following the occult and its meanings. Talk to the native peoples from your local areas. Yeah, especially if you're in Australia. Because in Australia, I mean, here in America, we have like Indian reservations and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff you can glean from there and like national parks and stuff like that. But Australia, you can actually go and talk to like their whole committee of whatever tribe and depending on what area you're in. And I think that's a well that is being tapped. I mean, there are a lot of great channels that go and talk to those people and like learn about the language and stuff. But if you yourself want direct experience to go and you're in a fortunate enough situation where you can do that, definitely do it. There's no downside to that. I was talking to somebody who went on one of those Randall Carlson Grimerica trips, and I was supposed to go. I should have went, man. I did not go. But there's one where Randall was there himself giving you a personal tour of the Scablands. That is invaluable. That's a well that not enough people are tapping. And hopefully I can catch the next one. Let's see. I don't like that the chat disappears. Uh, let's see. Following the occult Masonic orders, Pilgrim Society, all headed by Charles. Yeah, yeah. Secret societies. Here's another thing. Secret societies. That was there, and like Freemasons and stuff like that. That was like information was king. So if you had skills that nobody else had, then in that world, you're definitely making yourself useful, and you're gonna have a class of people who have those skills. Horse riding the same way, right? Just on a huge. The Scythians were like that, but just everybody was in on the secret society, so to speak, right? But the thing about the West is there are a lot of things that are done covertly. There's a lot of manipulation. There's think of Machiavellianism, right? Like all that shit. 48 laws of power, dude. Let's see. Australopithecus had to be Australian. Yeah, probably, man. Um, Randall, Brothers of the Serpent, Grimerica is great. Yeah, Randall is amazing, man. Like he's the number one underrated guy out there right now. I recently listened to his whole thing, and the problem with me is I can't sit and watch it visually, so there's a lot I'm missing. But just listening to the audio alone, like when he talks about graphs, it's just it's a it's incredible, like the stuff that he's doing on like he's torching climate change narrative. He burned that to the ground. And he's just using stuff from like the 70s, just graphs like CO2 graphs from the 70s. That guy, we need to protect Randall at all costs. Let's see. OG of modern cults are the Rosicrucians. Yeah. They said Abe Lincoln was a Rosicrucian. I've heard that a bunch of times. But going down the secret society rabbit hole, like Skull and Bones, that stuff really is real. And yeah, there are politicians really involved in that. But if you're talking to someone who thinks all that is bullshit, just explain to them that was like secret societies back then. People knew that like there were secret societies out there. Obviously, like think about it. We know that there's a smoky room where the president goes in and he's briefed on, like, the president of the U.S. isn't really making decisions. It's the people around him and the people in the background. Like if you tell the modern person that now, like they wouldn't laugh you out of the room. It was like that back with secret society. People knew like stuff like that, like mysticism or the occult, or even schools of Kabbalah back in like the 1000s, 1100s. People knew that there was knowledge out there. They just didn't know where it came from, but they know people had it, and there were a learned group of people. Like that people were aware of that much. People weren't like goons back then. Especially after the Protestant Reformation, where like people really started getting literate. Yeah, like don't underestimate the people back in the day. Now, I guess my original point was, if you're talking to someone who thinks like, oh, you think there's a secret, like they're just flabbergasted, they just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just tell them that, hey, man, that's just how a lot of like real information was disseminated. They don't call it intelligence for nothing, right? Intelligence agencies have been around since at least the Roman times, at the very least Roman times, and intelligence isn't a new thing. Like people have skills and people have information that is sensitive and stuff like that. That's not just a modern thing. Let's see. Skull and Bone. Climate science cooled the past and warmed the present. Skull and Bones is a Nazi Anglo-Saxon big boys. Yeah, pretty much, man. David is woke in the truest sense. As far as I found out, is coal is really a field theory and working with fields. The 23 degree angle bones. Yeah, Yeah, there's a lot to do with numbers and gematria. If you really want to go down that route, I'm not well versed in gematria. I do know that it exists and it has been used as like some sort of code and like encoding information. I heard of the Nazi question. Did the Nazis infiltrate America since paperclip? Are we in a Fourth Reich? I think that's kind of what I was getting at, like especially after World War One, where things kind of just change. And then the fact that Skull and Bones is, traced to that part of the world. A lot of people ask how things got infiltrated. Well, academia is one of the biggest institutions that got infiltrated, and you can just follow the dotted line after that. And then from the get go, there are things like the Federal Reserve, like you know what I mean. From the get go, this is why I think it was a blueprint, because they, like, when you're building something, right? There's a checklist of stuff that you need for you to do the job, and certain things need to be established, right? A way to control the money supply, and I'm sure you guys can dig up quotes of you know certain families, banking families, that say it, like they openly say it. If you control the money supply, you can pretty much do anything with the country, and we're kind of at the late stages of it now, right? God forbid you guys be nationalistic. right? We don't live in a country. We live in a hotel now. That's basically what's going on here. I'm talking about the West. As far as like living in the Fourth Reich and stuff like that, and paperclip, we did take Nazi scientists. That is true. NASA was formed from that. That is true. Um, but the infiltration started before that. It started before 1945, in my view. I think about the turn of the century is when things started to change, in America anyway. If some people argue it was actually the Civil War, and maybe honestly, I haven't looked too far into the implications of the Civil War, but um, I wouldn't be surprised, right? And then like Andrew Jackson, right? Like him kicking the bankers out the first time, and he warned about. So like this isn't, they could try to whitewash history, but there's still, if you for people who look, they can kind of read between the lines and see what's going on. And this, in some cases, you don't even have to read between the lines. Some people just say it clear as day. So yeah, there's another chat here. This is so annoying. Skull and Bones is Mithras driving time, looking down at us. Mithras was a god, and so yeah. A lot of people thought Jesus was Mithras or based on Mithras. Um, Honestly, I don't know. I don't know who's who dropped us in this aquarium of time. Werner von Braun was a professor of rocket science to the world. Yeah, WVB. Just read his headstone. The church is still is indebted to the Hofjudens, the Medicis. Yep. Yeah, the Medicis were one of those families that benefited from usury and money lending and all that stuff. Nazis were kind of really Blavatsky followers, spent lots of time. Yeah, Tibet, Madame Blavatsky. Actually, she's in the field of archaeology. She kind of knew her shit, which is pretty interesting. Um, and yeah, a lot of people were following Blavatsky, and here in America, a lot of people were following what's his name? Not the guy not Jack Parsons, the other mystic, the other bald crazy guy. What the fuck is his name? It'll come to me. The other mystic, you guys know who I'm talking about. The bald guy, the guy who's Barbara Bush's alleged dad or whatever. Uh, let's see. Andy J was a man's man with good old, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt, establishing a national park system. That in and of itself is incredible. Tibet also is another place that is just full. I think Tibet is one of those cities that's been around forever. And I'm talking like pre-Younger Dryas. I think that has been a hotbed of activity for generations, if I had to guess. The Spencers paid George Washington to sail. The Spencers. It's ringing a bell, but I don't remember. Um, Wait a second. He put Theosophus and Anthrosophus in the camps. Mithraism is still everywhere. There we go. Aleister Crowley. There we go. Yeah. A lot of people were following that guy. That guy was super influential, especially now. And I think that was at a time where it became avant-garde. That's another thing too. Things became avant-garde, like the UGG boots of ideas. Things become fashionable, right? Especially people who come from money. So like Crowley he came from a lot of money, very wealthy families, and if you're if you're a generational a family with generational wealth and influence that goes back to the Middle Ages, um, and you're like the fourth son, right, of of whoever. I don't think they I don't think you get recruited into the family business or whatever, but I'm pretty sure like you're not able to become a journalist and like uncover the truth, right? You know, they probably just give you money to indulge in whatever it is. And I think that's what Crowley was doing. I think he was just, you know, he was, maybe he was a narcissist, maybe he had a big ego, obviously. He had a lot of money. And whenever he would tell people about his mysticism or his whatever it is, his views, and people were enthralled with him, I mean, you know, what's a normal human to do? Let's see. He got kicked out of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Did he get kicked out? Well, if he got kicked out, then I think he started his own, like some other shit. I didn't. I think I kind of remember reading something about that. There was some sort of controversy there, right? Like, didn't he like have a? Didn't he like bang someone else's wife or something like that? Like he was like, yeah, the OTO. Yeah, he started that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that guy just had a lot of money and was getting laid. And you know, a lot of the stuff that he was regurgitating were like other mystics that came from other ideologies. Like Gnosticism is a big one. Like they're looking like they're remember in the 90s. Do you guys grow up in the 90s? Like when the Matrix came out, like there like toward the end of the 90s, there were a lot of movies that were coming out, like 12 Monkeys. There was a lot of movies that were like connecting to like esoteric principles and Gnostic principles. Like the Matrix is a really Gnostic movie. Matrix One, not the other ones. Um, and oh yeah, that's the other thing I was talking about. Like, so you have stuff like the Federal Reserve that gets established. Well, Hollywood is another one. Like film and media is another one where from the jump it was already they already intended to do what they wanted to do with it, which is disseminate propaganda like at times a million. Because there hadn't been Hollywood before then. So like when movies like The Matrix come out, it's like okay, these guys who at the time there were still OGs who were living in the 90s that were like in the vaudeville era, like pre-vaudeville. I mean pre-film in the vaudeville era, who were still alive and kicking in the 90s, who were still calling shots, who were still making movies as producers or bankrolling movies or whatever, and they have the final say on what makes it into the script and what doesn't. And if they're coming out with esoteric movies like that, I don't think it's like just some innocent college guy. I used to think this, like some bright-eyed person who I think there's a reason why those movies come out. And if the people who have an eye for propaganda and want to let's say influence people with certain indoctrination and they're reading those books, you know what I mean? So I think there's something inauthentic about that to me. It's like, okay, I feel like you're pushing this ideology on me, like why? And I mean, it was a great movie, but it makes me think twice about esotericism as a whole. At least the modern interpretation of it. Let's see. There's a few chats. Gotta love that sex magic. Oh yeah, dude. There's a lot of sex magic going on right now. Yeah, it seems like everything has been made with a purpose to direct us silently to their conclusion. Yeah, like people have different names for it, like the hidden hand or whatever. But ugh. But uh, here's another thing I wanted to talk about in this stream was ever since the pandemic happened, there's been a very slow news in I mean, there's been stuff going on in archaeology, no doubt, but it's been pretty slow. Things are getting cock blocked a lot, and but it's a good time to like really reconsider or like review everything that you've read or read more, catch up on other reading, and just understand that a lot of the stuff that's getting printed out there, even some of the stuff that I'm covering, is they could be like it's not 100% the truth, you know. But it's good to keep an eye on no matter what information's out there. The best way to discern shitty information is to hear everything, read as much as you can, even if it comes out of CNN or whatever. Just say, okay, what are the bullshitters saying? You know what I mean? Just like when you're engaging with someone, it's in your best interest to keep an eye on them. What are they doing? What are they saying? What are their actions? Why are they saying what they're saying at this time, etc. I think I skipped another chat. Statue of Liberty is myth. Yeah, I've heard about that. Um, the Statue of Liberty itself is like, it's not even American. That's a huge symbol right there. There's symbols everywhere. It's interesting. It's like a meme now. Just like it's like go to here's a good one. Go to Gavin Newsom's Twitter page and look at his banner. There's a symbol in there. I'm not gonna say which, but a lot has been made about that, and it's still up. It's been up for years. Wow, it's been 51 minutes already. Um, yeah, so I got to read Charles Proteus Steinmetz. I reckon he's got the keys. He's perfected Tesla's AC generator. Oh yeah, that's another thing too. Suppressed energy systems and suppressed technology. Seems like there's a lot of suppressing going on since the 1900s, like the early 1900s. Someone wants to change society for sure, especially in America. Um, I guess the like here's another thing that you guys could read, and it's just practical stuff, like making your own biodiesel. Like corn is the easiest thing to grow, especially if you have the space. Corn is so easy to grow, and it's so easy to make biodiesel out of just corn oil, and you don't need a big crazy machine to do it. Like those types of techniques, I'm sure the Western establishment, would want that to go out the window and be forgotten. He says there's no particles. Oh, whoops. He says there's no particles. It's all induction upon the ether, and he's the god of electricity. Yeah. Um, that free energy definitely, or ether, the ether theory, or whatever it is. I think there's definitely something to that, but it's been labeled pseudoscientist, and no one will take it seriously. No, until there's like some 12-year-old kid, like super genius with 200 IQ, just makes it in his garage or whatever, and you know what I mean, like an undeniable breakthrough. Um, which is another thing now. Like people like Elon Musk, right? He's supposed to be like the modern day Tesla, right? You got to be careful of cult of personality, man, because propagandists definitely know how to utilize that stuff. I'm not saying Elon isn't a genius or anything like that, but he, like, if he was a propagandist, what a great tool he would be, you know. And Tesla, I mean, like green energy, like electric cars and stuff like that. There's a lot of like if you wanted it as a solo sand, like on its own with like no coal or anything like that, natural gas or anything like that, just as a standalone, it's not going to work. And that's not even including like the battery that you're going to have to toss after, like, I don't know, however many years, not that long, the lithium battery, and getting that lithium, like, you know what I mean? There's just so much that is underneath the iceberg that most people don't even think about. And it's not really their fault. It's just they have like a lot of this shit is anything that's crammed down your throat you should be leery of. Uh, they talk about ether all the time, but they call it space time. Oh, right, yeah, yeah. Well, nothing's new under the sun. Everything's just relabeled or rediscovered, right? I think that's how the saying goes. Elon reminds you of Biff from Back to the Future too. That's fucking funny, dude. He is Biff, man. With hair plugs and everything. Yeah, I don't know. Elon might be a good guy. I have no idea, but everybody that influential has to be met with skepticism. 5G was invented by a drone? 5G was invented for drone warfare. Maybe. I don't know too much about 5G. I just know that there's a lot of towers that have been popping up. A lot of those 5G towers have been popping up. So I don't know. I mean, there's even propaganda with that both ways. I mean, I saw this one meme where it was like a 5G tower, and there's like a half dead tree, like on this half closest to the tower was dead, but on the other half it was like perfectly fine. I don't know. I think that seems kind of extreme. But if it's bad for you, I don't know. I've stood next to those things and I've felt fine. But if it's a long game thing, then I guess I won't know until my brain is mush, right? But I don't live in the city proper, so I don't think I have to worry about that too much. Not, but every time I go in and like visit people, that's like one of the first things that I notice on the road are, wow, that wasn't there before. Or it's like a fake tree that looks like a tower. Yeah. Another thing that I think you guys, if you're really into archaeology specifically, they have volunteers for like digs and stuff all the time, or just like carrying equipment or whatever it is that they need, carrying dirt or hauling dirt around. Um, they need people for that, especially now, especially since the pandemic. But yeah, like the Zan motor thing is, and this probably be the last thing I cover before I get off. The Zan motor thing is wild. I mean, like they had all these projections for uh, the New Frontiers project that just got pushed back and delayed and delayed. So I haven't even looked into what's next. Uh, but they should take that thing to Beringia just to settle things once and for all. And they'll probably find something. They're finding lots of stuff in South America, that's for sure. That is, if you guys either live in South America or you're gonna plan a trip there, uh, before you go to your ayahuasca ceremony, you guys should visit some of the jungle there with like a tour guide. I think that'd be worth it. Just don't like hire some psycho or some shady dude. Get like a legit up and up company that'll do it, and preferably with a large enough group where you feel comfortable. But really go, or somebody that who knows the area. That like it'd be like going to Egypt with Graham Hancock or something, right? If you're fortunate enough to do that, you should definitely do it. But these options are available, is what I'm trying to get at. Especially if you're lucky enough to be in the position to do that, which I don't know. I don't know if stuff like tourism, like archaeological tourism, will be around in the next few years. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm just saying that you know a lot of people in the West, especially in Europe, might not have energy, not at the level that they had, before all this shit happened. But yeah, go if you're like from Ohio, for example, go to Serpent Mound. That is like right in the backyard of you guys. There's a lot of stuff in America. Go see the Grand Canyon. Go to Sedona. Go to Joshua Tree. Right. Then someone mentioned Teddy Roosevelt before. The national parks is people from all over the world. That is an underestimated tourist attraction. Niagara, whatever it is. Brian Forrester should be the dude to hit up South America. Oh yeah, Brian Forrester has great stuff. Great stuff. He had a thing on Puma Punku that I watched. Oh man, that guy is a gem. He's got that. If you want to know someone who's on the cutting edge, that guy's on the cutting edge. 100%. His whole life is dedicated to this stuff. That guy I admire. Brian Forrester is the man. Um, we got to protect Brian too. Well, before I head out, so a lot of the material that I've been going through, uh, partially it's been technical. I want to say 80% of the time is technical difficulties, uh, or like personal. Like for a while, like I was looking for a place to live for a while and stuff like that, and just getting settled, and then like having technical difficulties and stuff, and then another like 15-20% is archaeology is slow nowadays, and a lot of uh, a lot of like cellular, like there's a lot of agenda pushing going on right now, and I don't want to highlight a lot of that. I mean, I highlighted some bullshit. Like I did a April Fool's joke one of the old episodes, and it was an April Fool's joke. I knew it was a joke, but I just did it just because. Oh, hey, it was printed, and I thought it would be funny. But looking back, it's just I don't know. I just think it's a waste of time. It wasn't that funny. It was like a supposed to be like a receipt from like ancient Egypt, and some guy was arguing on papyrus that this guy didn't pay him back. It was just some dumb thing, which I thought was funny at the time, but you guys get what I mean. There's just a lot of bullshit out there, a lot of agenda driven stuff. But what I would recommend is just read, read, read Graham Hancock's recent stuff. His America Before is just incredible. And just go through, you don't have to read the book, just go through his sources and read the source material, and decide for yourself, Um, but one more thing is just sharpen that blade of discernment that you have, you know? Uh, and like I said, read between the lines and just take everything with a grain of salt, but keep a log into it. Like if you read something that's interesting, find out more about it. Find out like some source material. Um, like for instance, if you're into like Western philosophy, right? Who would you like if you're talking to a kid out of high school and they're really interested in Western philosophy and they ask you where should I start? You're gonna say the ancient Greeks. You're gonna say like the Socrates dialogues, right? Plato's dialogues. Um, all these, or if you're into Western history, you're probably going to go to, whether dubious or not, like Josephus or whatever, or Manetho or whoever it is, you're going to direct people to that. But if you guys are into Western history and like Western philosophy, just know that all of those roads it'll lead you right back to American history. I've kind of realized that now. So, anyway, I hope the audio was good. I hope the background noise wasn't too bad. Um, I don't know why I was getting that weird feedback earlier. I hope the video comes out all right. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. I'll probably do this again at some point, maybe maybe next Monday. But yeah, I'll try to, and I'll also try to schedule things like maybe a day or two ahead. So check out Ken Wheeler's work; he'll blow your mind. Duly noted. I will check his work. That does sound familiar. Ken Wheeler does sound familiar. Oh, and another thing, if you guys have a drone, and you guys live near some sort of, mount, whatever it is, some sort of natural formation, definitely just fly that thing around with the proper permits, of course. I don't want anybody to get in trouble. But like, if you have like a GoPro attached to that thing, get some footage and post that because you want to put that out there just to have like a record of of just what the local geography is. All right, anyway, I'm rambling. Have a good rest of your day, guys. I'm out of here.